I'm not gonna say that a butcher should, no, I am gonna say that the bacon at a butcher shop is better. If you love bacon, but have never had it from a butcher shop, you're missing out. This is a hog, or a half a hog. I'm gonna show you how I butcher it, cure it, smoke it, slice it, and even cook it to turn it into bacon the way a butcher does it. Hog is my first love, yes it is. Most, if not all, small butcher shops are going to use the whole animal from nose to toes. Toes are probably the only thing I haven't found anything to do with. Pork bacon comes from the belly, but before we can get to it, we need to break down the hog into a few larger pieces. The first thing we're gonna do is remove the shanks. God. This is like the bed you don't want in your in-laws' house, okay? With the boning knife, I'm going to remove the foreshank and the hind shank. A boning knife is usually between 5 and 6 inches long. This is the type of knife that you want to use to get in between the bones. In the wintertime, would normally cut the foreshank into rounds, brine them and cure them and smoke them. Something that you can use for making like a split pea soup. And then we have the trotters, a lot of gelatin, a lot of aspic. Going to saw off the shoulder from the loin. Here we have 1 bone, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm gonna cut right between the 4th and 5th. This bone saw is to saw directly through bones. I generally prefer a shorter bone saw. I feel like you can have more steer to it, where the longer bone saws sometimes bend a lot when I'm using them. Come through with a scimitar and just separate the shoulder from the loin section. Top part of the shoulder here is what we would refer to as the Boston butt or pork shoulder. The bottom half is known as the picnic ham. Traditionally in my family we use this one, which is more like the pernil, which is the leaner part. I'm going to remove the ham. With my bone saw, I'm just gonna rest it here on the hip, the H bone here, and the tail. And I'm gonna separate, I'm just gonna saw through it. A lot of muscle, very little intramuscular fat. You just want to saw until you hear the bone crack, then you're going to come back and use a scimitar to separate the muscle. When you're cutting, you really want to like put the point on the table and pull back. So now you're left with the loin section. Rib loins is what you know more as your rib chops, come from this end. Center cut loin or loin chops, this is more like your porterhouse T-bone section if talking about beef. And this here is your sirloin section, which I love. This end of the ribs is what we know as spare ribs or St. Louis style ribs. This part which curves is more your baby back ribs. And under here, this is all the belly. I'm gonna remove all of this leaf lard. Leaf lard was Crisco before we had Crisco. The cleanest, purest type of fat, which is often used for baking. The leaf lard here to protect your organs, and just nestled underneath the leaf lard here is a kidney. There we go. The texture is much different than fat back. It's a little bit more spongy and marshmallowy and feels like a fat cloud. And I'm just gonna saw right through the tail end, remove the sirloin from the loin section. This is where we're gonna separate the pork chops from the spare ribs and the belly. All right. Oof.
What do you think of this table?
So now I'm gonna separate the loin and the belly. All of this is the belly, just below these bones here. These are our spare ribs. Once we remove the spare ribs, we're left with the belly. Run my boning knife just below these spare ribs. I'm trying to go as closely as I can, but maybe not too close. I can leave some meat on the spare ribs, but also leave meat on the belly. So I'm just gonna lightly and just connect the dots. I'm coming underneath. Here we have our spare ribs. And this is all the belly here, okay? This is where the bacon is. Oh, I'm hot again. So most of the fat is on the underside of this slab. Once we clean up the sides of this bacon, it should weigh roughly around 10 pounds. I'm going to clean up the sides because they're not even. Try to get it to be the same thickness so that when we cure it, it all cures evenly. You could smoke this whole slab of bacon, but split this belly in half, more for convenience than anything else, really. And that probably looks very familiar to you. In the US, you don't find skin on bacon. That's something that you see more often in England. Releasing a little piece of fat here, something for me to hold on to. Running my knife underneath the fat. And I'm trying to run it as closely as possible to the skin and leaving as much fat as possible on the belly. As you can tell, I'm using like the whole length of the knife to try to get cleaner cut than lots of shingled cuts. The skin almost feels like vinyl. The fat is something that's just really creamy. When it's warm and you're touching it, it feels actually like lotion. This skin that I just removed from the belly, oftentimes we'll cut them into strips and sell them as dog treats instead of buying a raw hide that's been bleached and made to this like really white colored hide. It's a very processed product for your pets. So now clean up the sides, even them out, and then get them ready for cure. So over here. Remove the skin, it's trimmed, and now it's ready to be cured. At my butcher shop, we dry cure bacon instead of wet curing. I feel like the flavor is more intense or just more pronounced. We are going to use a traditional pink salt, sodium nitrite. And it keeps the meat very pink and not gray. Foodborne illnesses thrive in moisture. So by removing all the moisture in this, we are preventing any bacteria or foodborne illnesses to develop. When you're using pink salt, you want to make sure that you use 0.2% of the actual weight of the piece of meat. That's 5.845 pounds. 0.2% of 5.845 pounds. Would somebody like to ask Siri?
5.304 grams.
5.304. 5.304. Bacon generally has a little bit of sweetness to it. To make the cure blend, we have equal parts of kosher salt and brown sugar. You could interchange sugar and maple syrup. I'm going to add black pepper and coriander. The coriander is not something that's traditional. I really enjoy black pepper and coriander together. I always have. It kind of reminds me of the flavor profile of pastrami. And here I'm going to add a little bit of cayenne. It seems like a lot, but it gives just a little bit of spice, not a lot of spice. And right now, this piece of bacon, I don't know if you can tell, but it's quite flexible, it's quite floppy. When this bacon is properly cured, it's going to become really firm. So I'm gonna put this in a lug and we flip them every day. That is going to make sure that the belly is cured evenly on either side. The actual curing process, it's going to take roughly a week. Incorporate the pink salt, mix it all up, and then we're going to rub the belly with this cure. So basically what I wanna do is tack it on. I don't know if you can see, but it's kind of like sticking now to that fat. This piece of pork belly begins to sweat. All of this rub is going to liquefy. This feels so good, I don't even want to stop. This goes into your refrigerator for up to a week. During the course of the week, sodium nitrate, the pink salt, is going to remove all the moisture and all of the flavors are going to infuse this piece of belly. It's firmer, it's not as flexible. In the last week, this belly has sweat a lot. It's released a lot of its moisture. We could eat this as is and not necessarily smoke it. It would still have to be cooked, but the smoking just adds another layer of flavor. I'm going to hot smoke this piece of bacon. By hot smoking, I want to be very careful that I don't do it too hot because I don't want all of the fat to render out. So I'm going to do it at 200 degrees. The smoker that I'm using has an electric coil. I place the wood chips in the smoker, which is going to be heated by the electrical coil, which will then produce smoke. I want to remove the bacon at a food safe temperature of 150 degrees Fahrenheit. It should only take just a few hours. So this has been smoked and chilled. The color, I don't know if you can tell, has changed. If you would have put this into the oven and not smoked it, it would have been a much paler color, but the smoke definitely made this more of a darker brown. This is a slab piece of bacon. There's a couple of different ways a butcher shop will slice their bacon. It may be thin or thick, but oftentimes they will always have a piece of slab bacon and can cut it the way you would like. The first slice, I'm gonna face it, which is remove the first piece. This piece is generally a little bit saltier. It's where the cure has been touching. I would just like keep for my lardons or something that I know is going to maybe cook in like a soup or a stew. Face cut this side as well. I'm gonna have to cut off a piece of this bacon here just so that I can fit this on the slicer. Another piece of bacon. Sorry, I'm getting out myself. So now we're gonna do some thinly sliced bacon. I'm going to use a deli slicer because the slices will all come out the same type of thickness. I could hand cut these. This is just much more efficient and it's all gonna be the same. I'm going to now do a thicker slice. All right, last one. Et voila, bacon. You see the fat here, some beautiful meat. You see how it's still pink in color? It smells really smoky. Some people desire a thicker piece of bacon and may accompany their eggs with maybe one slice. It's definitely gonna have more bite. You can still have the center still be a little bit creamy and chewy and crispy at the same time. But if you're someone who desires maybe something that's just like crispy, then maybe you would desire something that's cut thinner. I'm gonna fry up this bacon. It's gonna be incredibly crispy and delicious, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Fry up this bacon in this cast iron skillet. It's going to cook within its own fat and it's just gonna crisp up really, really well. I think we should do a thick slice first. Ooh, do you hear that? Yeah. So I have this on a medium high. The secret is not to flip it that often. So just don't be impatient and let it fry up. I don't wanna be impatient, but I'm being very impatient. Bacon's starting to bubble up a bit, just starting to burn a little bit, and that's going to happen especially if there's a little bit of sugar in your curing brine. Sugar tends to burn, but this is looking very good. While we were smoking it, we smoked it on a low temperature because we wanted to maintain that fat. Fat now is basically rendering out of these slices of bacon, and the bacon is now crisping up within its own fat. All right, I'm gonna lie them here on the cooling rack. We'll let the fat just drip. Fry up a few of the thin slices. All right, thin slices of bacon. Popping, careful. Much faster than the thicker slices. Love that sizzling sound, do you hear it? Ouch. I thought I was partial to the thick until I saw these frying up, and these look awesome. These are done. Nice and crispy. It's gonna be salty, delicious. How does that look? Oh my God, that looks so good, doesn't it? The biggest difference with the thin and the thick is that the thin one definitely crinkles up much more than the thicker. This is something that I would like served up maybe next to like my eggs that I would eat more like a steak. This thinner sliced bacon is something that I would prefer on my BLT. BLT, some bacon, lettuce, tomato. Here I go. Delicious. The bacon is crispy, perfectly salty, lush and unctuous and just awesome. I'm gonna taste this thick bacon because why not? I just cooked it. It definitely has a little bit more bite to it, but you really can't go wrong. It's bacon after all. At the end of the day, the bacon that you take home from your butcher shop is going to be a higher quality. The taste, the texture is something that can't be beat. Go to your local butcher shop. We've put a lot of care into making this bacon and you can definitely taste it.